we go. All right, everybody, welcome back to the podcast. And I say the podcast because there are multiple podcasts here. So this is our first ever time this is a three-way podcast with my friends Rachel, Chrysanthi, and I'm Farron. And we are coming together today to give you a podcast that is all about podcasting. And we thought of this amazing idea because I know for me personally, I hear all the time from people in my messages about how did you start a podcast? People that are ambitious to do something for themselves or to start their own podcast or really just to get their message out there. And I retell it all the time, like, oh, it's super easy. It's just simple. It's just, having an idea and going with it. And I have watched my friends, Chrysanthi, Rachel, we've all done this together, come up with podcasts, 3 totally different ideas, 3 totally different people living in 3 totally different places, different family, everything different, but with a mission to like, hey, I want to do a podcast. I'm just going to go for it. And so I thought it's been so inspiring. So I thought we were going to share this podcast with all of you, all of the listeners to listen in and hear how we did it, what it means, and how maybe you can start either your own podcast or start anything or any goal that you have in your life. So we're going to start this off. So we were going to make this kind of like conversational and talk to each other. And so Rachel, like, why don't you start us off? Like, what's your podcast? How did it start? Tell us about it.
Yeah, absolutely. I love this. This is the best idea ever. So I am Rachel Mitchell. If you cannot see me, we did put this on YouTube, so you need to check out our YouTube pages. But I am a wife of 17 years to Matt. I love him very much. 2 boys Henry is 12, Milo is 11. And by profession, I am health and fitness coach, along with these other ladies. That's how we actually met and became friends, which is super cool. But I am also a follower of Christ, and my faith is super, super important to me. I weave it into everything that I do, from what I post on social media to how I run my business to how I lead my family. And my podcast personally is just a natural extension of that. I kind of like to talk, and I really wanted an outlet that allowed me to share my heart, to share my mission, to talk to other mamas and women who maybe struggled with how to incorporate faith into the everyday aspect of life. And podcasting has just given me a way to do that. And so, I honestly thought about my podcast for 2 years and just never took action because I was so afraid, and I'm not technologically smart at all. So I did end up hiring someone to help me start my podcast, and I can explain more about what I did there. But yeah, that's how my podcast came to be. I started it in August of 2021. And so it's been a joy. It's been an outlet. I don't make any money from my podcast. It's just been a way for me to share what's on my heart more than anything. I think, Chrysanthi, yours is probably the same, right?
Yeah. So I'm Chrysanthi Finn. My podcast is the Fulfilled Life Project. And like Rachel said, I'm also a health and fitness coach. And when I started on this journey of health and fitness coaching, my mission, the word that came to me, I'm like all about words. And the word that came to me was fulfilled. And so my team is Team Fit and Fulfilled. And so when I sat down to think about a name for my podcast, I'm like, why am I actually doing this podcast? The Fulfilled Life Project just came to me because my whole mission is to, especially in a world that's kind of heavy and busy and we can get caught in the go, go, go. I wanted somewhere for women to go and listen and to learn how to live a life that is fulfilled, a life that is more, a life that is not just, wake up and get to the grind and get the kids off to school and all these things. Like, how can you get more out of life? So kind of backing up, I am a wife and mom of 3 little kids. My kids are, at the time that we're recording this, 8, 6, and 3. So it's busy, and it's easy for me to like get stuck in that same stuff, different day mindset, because really it is the same stuff most days. But yeah, so I started my podcast. To be honest, I had it on my heart for a really long time, but for so long I got stuck in the like, well, but I don't know how, and who am I to have a podcast? Like, who's even going to listen to my podcast? And from years of putting myself out there as a coach, I would have women come to me and be like, well, remember when you told me this? I remember when you said that. And I was like, no, I said that. And so then I started to realize, like, okay, God's putting on my heart. Like, I see others, all these other people putting themselves out there and starting podcasts. Like, why not me? And so I did do a course, and I kind of taught myself the basics. And from there, it's just been fun. I started at the same time as Rachel. August of 2021 was my first episode, August 10th. I did it on my birthday, and it's just been fun. It's been really fun ever since. Like, I just get such joy from sitting down and recording and then listening to myself, because sometimes I don't even realize what I talk about. And then hearing other people say like, yeah, like it's so meaningful for someone to be like, I listened to your podcast, not because I get anything from it, but just because I'm like, God gave me this gift of my voice and now I'm able to use it. So that's kind of where it's at.
I love that. And I love that we all kind of start for like different reasons, but it was like something deep within our heart that was like, you know what, let's just do it. And I love that, for people listening, like nobody started for money. Like, I'm going to do this, it's like, hey, I have a voice and I really love to use it. And that's kind of how, for my podcast, the Inspire Her podcast came about, is that I just wanted to, showcase women. So I am a little bit introverted, and where I get nervous doing things for myself. So for me, my easy outlet to start a podcast was, I'm just going to interview other women. I'm going to put all the focus off of me and put it on other people. And then in doing that and just going for it and saying, I'm going to just do this, it made me get comfortable with sharing my own story and being like, you know what, I want to talk more. And to be totally honest, watching Chrysanthi and Rachel, knowing that they talk like on their podcast was like inspiring for me to get that courage. Like, okay, I can actually share more of my story. Maybe people want to hear, just like you said, Chrysanthi, people, wanted to hear from you and they can reflect back on these podcasts. And I think it's incredible. So, okay. So, the question, how, what does it take? Like, if someone says to you guys, I want to start a podcast, comes to you, your kids come to you, I want to start a podcast, what would you tell them to do?
My kids. Okay. That threw me off a little bit.
Because you're like going to lay it out. No sugarcoating it to your kids, like.
So I would say why? Like, why? What? You have to have a purpose. You have to have a vision for what you're going to share. And it has to have meaning, whether it is like teaching people how to clean toilets or building a business from the ground up or whatever it is. It has to have purpose and meaning. Otherwise, you're not going to show up to do it every week. Right. And then I know that for me, and I'm probably for you guys, like, have a clear launch plan. Like, when do you want to start it? Don't pressure yourself to start next week, because that's going to overwhelm you. But like today, at the time of this, it's the beginning, middle of March, right? When we're recording, 6 weeks from now, what do you want to have done? What's your launch date going to be? And then just backtrack, like figure out what you have to do to get started, to get it up, to get a photo, to get your first few episodes launched or recorded. And then when you start it, you feel confident that, hey, I've got something under me and I can keep going. And that's probably my best, like, know why and know when you're going to start it and just come up with a plan.
My brain is so different. So like, if you had told me that, I would have stopped at why, because I'm like, I don't even know. I'm done. I'm out. I'm out the door. So for me, it was more of like, a theme. So like I came up with the word fulfilled. And then I think I sat down and I was like, okay, what are all the things when I think of like teaching women how to feel fulfilled or live a life that's fulfilled, what comes to mind? So I wrote down like a list of topics. And then for me, I had to do a course, because I know I could have gone and found the information somewhere. But like I said, if you give me like an open-ended question or said like, go create a launch plan, I would freeze dead in my tracks. So there are tons of courses out there. Do your research, find a course that matches up with your personality. If it's a person hosting a course, make sure you kind of jive with their vibe and then go with it and just be a student. For me, I needed that step by step. And so I also like picked my date. So similar, I guess, to your launch plan, but I picked my date. Like I said, it was meaningful to me because it was my birthday. So I was like, it's going to happen on that day. And I said, I'm launching a podcast on this day. So I gave myself that accountability. And then I just learned the steps and kind of went with it that way. So I guess it's similar, but I needed a shift. And it's funny how we all work differently, right? But that was what worked for me.
But still, we all work differently, but the goal still happened, we made it happen, and I love the date. I think that is such good, like, Rachel said, like 6 weeks and like setting a date, like your birthday, setting a date, like this is going to launch this date. And, oh, like, gosh, well, we know from like doing fitness and health and helping women, for however many years of our life, like 6 years now, all of us, you don't break that promise to yourself. Like if you want to do something in your life, I don't care if you want to crochet hats for a living, or you're like, I want to do something. If you say it and it comes on your heart, like go for it. Like, don't make excuses. Like, don't, talk yourself out of it. Set that date. Like Chrystal, like, okay, my birthday, this is it. This podcast is going up because I need to do it. And you never know what can happen unless you actually do it. And I always, for like everything in my life, I always say like the 5-year rule for me is like, in 5 years from now, will I look back and be like, man, I really regret like doing that podcast. That was dumb. No, you will never say that. But in 5 years from now, you might look back and be like, man, I regret not like just trying. Who knows where I would be? What if my voice, my message, helps another woman, helps someone else? Like, even like, if you're Rachel said, even if you're teaching someone how to clean toilets, like, I don't know who I'm helping right now, but like, why would you ever take that away from somebody? Like, your voice matters. So if, you have really talked about God in this, but if God, puts that into your heart, like, hey, you should do a podcast, there's a reason why that went to your brain and into your heart, and the reason why you said it.
Yeah. I was actually just going to say something exactly like that. Like, some of the biggest choices and decisions I've made in my life were absolutely the scariest, but they also felt like things I couldn't not do. Does that make sense? Like,
Yeah.
I knew that if I didn't do it, I would not be walking in the plan that God had for my life. Right. And whether you're a person of faith or not, like, is it something that you just can't shake the idea? You can't let it go. And that's where I stalled for 2 years because I thought all the same things that you guys just shared, but at the end of it, I was just like, just do it. Like, just do it. Even if it flops, you tried, like, who cares?
And here's the thing with podcasting too, is like, it's not a one-time thing. It's not like you're going to show up and you're going to nail it and you're going to be like, did that, check it off the box. Like, it is an evolution. And I know that I'm going to, be podcasting. And let's say, I don't even know what year it is anymore, but like, let's say in 2028, I'm still podcasting, and I'm going to go back to that August 10th episode of 2021 and listen and be like, oh my gosh, like I was so green, right? I was such an amateur. Here's how far I've gone. And that's what's cool, is that it is going to grow and it is going to change and it is going to evolve, and your message is going to evolve because life evolves, but you have to grow through that. So grow with it. It doesn't have to be perfect.
I refuse to take down some of my worst podcasts, because I'm like, that just shows my growth, So it is kind of fun.
I love that.
Yeah.
I think a question. So I'm sure somebody listening right now is like, oh, great, you could do a podcast, but like, I don't have the tools. I don't have a microphone. I don't have all this stuff. Like, you think and I think I thought that too in the beginning, like, I'm going to need like studio, or I'm going to need like this crazy microphone. And I remember listening to a girl on a podcast, and she was like, I'm recording this from my iPhone in a hotel room. She just recorded it and saved it on her phone. And it like blew my mind. I'm like, oh my gosh, like, we are totally overthinking this, like your word is your word, no matter where it's coming from. It doesn't have to be from this crazy microphone. So for you guys, like, did you feel that way too? Like, you needed these tools? And then I just bought a microphone off of Amazon. And we can link all of our stuff for everybody who's listening. Like, we'll link it, in our notes, but like, I don't really have anything.
I bought a microphone and don't even use it.
Oh.
Like, that's so silly, isn't it? I should use it. But I had one like mixed up with it where I totally messed up some awesome podcasts, and I had to re-record them. And ever since then, I've just been like, I'm not going to use my mic. I just use what I already had, a laptop and Zoom. That's how I record.
Wow. Yeah.
What about you?
I have a microphone. My sister-in-law actually bought me this like little, for people watching, it's like this little thing.
Oh, fun.
It's like foam. I don't know if it makes a difference, but I think it was more for like, it just showed up at my doorstep, and I was like, that's really cool. That was like such a sign of encouragement for me. And I was like, I love it. So I use that. I have my like Apple headphones that came for free with a phone at some point that still has a cord, because you're better off using a cord if you have headphones.
Yes.
I do want fancy ones, just because like, I feel like that would make me look cool. Right.
Yeah. You're so funny. I know, because it is intimidating when you see people post that they're doing a podcast and they have like this cool mic that's coming out, and you're like, yeah, I got nothing.
But you know what? I will say this too. So there are things like, so if you get into it, and these are things like your first episode doesn't have to sound great, and your first episode doesn't have to have the fancy equipment, but like maybe as you go along and you listen back and you're like, oh, I don't like the way that sounds, then you can like Google what's the best microphone for podcasting, what are the best headphones for podcasting. But then also like I use Buzzsprout for posting, right? And I use GarageBand for recording. And so in Buzzsprout, I pay a little extra on my like thing every month for, it's called Magic Mastering, and it kind of smooths out any echoes and any background noise. And then in GarageBand, I just learned from the church podcast I recorded that there's something called, I forget what it's called, but it's called something, and it does the same thing. So I'm like, I can double up on those. But really quickly, a couple of weeks ago, I had a podcast I was recording, and I try to do them like when no one's at home, which is like, I have a 3-year-old and she goes to school like a total of 6 hours a week. So it's like, you got to get it done. But so she was home one week and we had just gotten a puppy, and I'm in the middle of recording, and she's the sweetest little thing. Like I can't even yell at her still. And so she comes in and she's sitting on the carpet in my office, and the puppy comes in and he's in like the nibbling stage, and she's in the background going, ow, he's biting me. He's biting. And I'm trying to like ignore her. It's so bad, but I knew he wasn't hurting her because he's like a puppy nibble. And she's like, mommy, he's biting me. And I was like, okay, like trying to get through it. And I recorded it, and I don't edit my podcast. That's another thing. Like I record it and I post it, and boom, like you get what you get and you don't get upset. Right. And so I had someone reach out and they're like, oh my gosh, great episode this week. I was like, are you kidding? It was a hot mess. My kid was getting mauled by my dog in the background. And they're like, no, like that's what makes it real. And that was really cool. Like you got through it and you are a mom, and that was it. So
I love that.
Even have that happen.
That's good.
So I would love to touch on real quick. Look, this is like real mom life, because Chrysanthe's like, look, I got to go. I got to pick up a kid. Like, let's go. But I think we can all attest to this. What I'm going to say is that if you're listening to us, and you're like, I want to start a podcast, or you're just interested in what we're talking about, I would say also the other side of that is the support that you show for your friends and people that are doing a podcast. And I listened to this one podcast, and he always talks about paying the fee. And for us, we're saying like, we don't get paid for this, but he's like, paying the fee for listening to this podcast. Like what we do is for free. 99% of the time you're going to listen to a podcast, they're going to be free. It's people that are taking the time to share content that they believe is working for them in hopes of helping someone else. So paying the fee is like, is sharing that you listen to it on Instagram and tagging that podcast or tagging that person, or posting it on Facebook, or like, if you're listening to this right now, like message, if you've listened to podcasts before, message that person. You may think like, this person's never going to see it. Like send them a message and say, that was great. Or like, I listened to your podcast. And if you have a friend, like Chrysanthe said that her friend sent her something, like you don't have to send people stuff, but you can just say, I listened to your podcast, or I acknowledge. You might be like, I don't ever want to listen to podcasts. It's not my thing. You can acknowledge that someone created a podcast and you can share it. And I think that's kind of like you paying the fee. Like it's free. We're doing this for free. It's like, give people love, love for what they're doing. And so that's the only way that I believe that we know. I think for me, it's a virtual high five when people like tag and like, I listen, and it makes me feel like, oh, okay, people are listening. Because in all things with life, if you feel like people aren't paying attention to what you're doing, you get this, like, I want to give up, or like, is this even working? Is it helping people? But 1,000 people might have listened, but nobody said a darn thing. And you're like, okay, well, I suck. And we shouldn't feel like that. So, so this is my, like, I wish I've been trying to tell people more on my podcast, like in the beginning, like, shout, if you hear something you love, shout it out. Like, don't keep it to yourself. That's just like girl code at this point. Right.
Yeah.
I
love that. You're so encouraging. Your podcast is correctly named. It's awesome.
It's funny listen, like for everybody listening, when they were each girl was saying what their podcast was named, I was like, totally. So in my mind, I'm like, this is totally them. Because I know them and I love them. And it's like, this is the fulfill. I mean, Chrysanthe, you literally say that all the time. And, Rachel talking about living on a mission and talking, incorporating, God into what you're saying is just, it's so you, like, it's just, so, but okay. So let's all share, how can people continue to follow us on our journey, and where, like, your name and your Instagram and your handles and whatever you want people to tag?
Yeah. I'll start. On Instagram, I am Rachel J. Mitchell, Rachel. And we'll put this in the show notes. That's my personal Instagram for like faith and fitness motivation. But Living on Mission, my podcast, I have a page for that one too, which I know a lot of people don't do. But I did want to separate it from my business stuff. But it's Living on Mission Pod. And I do sometimes do fun reels over there and things like that. But just it's Living on Mission podcast on Apple and Spotify and all those things.
Yeah. And I'm Chrysanthi Finn on Instagram. There's probably not another one out there. I'm pretty sure Chrysanthi Finn. So on Instagram, it's Chrysanthi_Finn. And then I also have, like Rachel, a Fulfilled Life Project page on Instagram. So it's just the Fulfilled Life Project. And that's all things podcast. And then you can find me also on Facebook as well. And then the podcast is on Spotify and Apple.
Yay. And I'm Farron Duran. Again, I think I'm the only Farron Duran in the world.
Isn't that cool? I love it.
No, like Chrysanthi Finn, you definitely are.
It's like freaking Madonna.
Yeah. And I have the Inspire Her podcast, and it's at Inspire Her Podcast too. So cool. We all have our own little different, we need to be on the lookout, my friends, because we're going to have to create like a real, like a three of us. We're actually all going to be together soon. So that's
yes. Oh, that's exciting.
So, okay. So any last words, my friends?
Just go for it. I mean, honestly, just go for it. Don't let fear, comparison, or complacency or anything hold you back. Just look at it as an expression of who you are. And just honestly, sometimes I think about the woman who's sitting there listening to my podcast, and I envision her, and that really motivates me to say something or to not just put the podcast recording to the side again, but just go for it and do it with purpose and with vision and just see what happens.
Yeah. And I would just say, just to echo that, your voice can literally change someone's life. So put it out there.
I love it. That's like I love the quotes. They're like, that was awesome. Totally agree. I encourage everyone to listen to this podcast, to tag us, everybody, Living on a Mission Pod, at Fulfilled Life Project Pod, Inspire Her Podcast. I think that even just sharing it is kind of your way to someone else to listen to it and to be inspired. You never know, like you sharing it, it's going to get into someone else's lap who says, I want to do and share my story too. So let's encourage each other. Let's have a great day. And thank you for listening, and find us. We're going to be on YouTube if you want to see this, so you can see our faces and see what we actually look like, which is so fun. Or follow us on Instagram. And if you ever have any questions, you can reach out to any one of us. We're happy to answer them. So we'll see you later.
Bye.
Bye.